you're completely engulfed into the culture. That's what it
Yeah.
is. You're just either you're in or you're out. I mean, it's you're completely engulfed by the culture, and this kind of takes up a lot of who you are and what you are in many ways. You try to redefine that as you get older. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
in your youth, you really dive into this with 2 feet.
You've spent an entire career fighting fires.
But yeah. So that was a good time. We had some good times there. Socks on, socks off. So challenge your shift. So y'all sleep with your socks on, or you sleep with your socks off?
I enjoyed the challenge of coming up to a chaotic scene and bringing some reason and calm to that.
And rescuing the injured, sick, and dying.
To the point where we'd be on box alarms, and somebody or two would be like, "Hey man, do you do anything other than teller?"
It's different now. You're an officer. You're responsible for these people. Okay, you're going to be taking into these buildings. You need to make the right decisions.
But that's all over now.
Have a network, have the ability to reach out, and it is very much important for leadership to say it is okay not to be okay.
What do you do when the sirens stop?
The passion I had to be the best master firefighter on Truck 25 is absolutely nothing compared to my passion for peer support.
You've hung up your gear.
Because my definition was, I'm a fireman. Like, I'm a captain, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a this, I'm a that.
And you walk out of the firehouse for the last time.
At the end of the day, like, this is our profession and it's our career. Like, we're not here to be friends. Like, yeah, it's great if we're friends, but we should be close because we both take this job seriously and we're both invested into learning the craft and doing the craft the best that we can for the people that we serve.
What do you do with your life when the smoke clears?
Welcome back to the When the Smoke Clears podcast. I'm Russell Miles, here with the newly retired Tony Ben Cosme. Thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate everybody who has supported us and encouraged us, and especially as we've been gone for an extended break, but we're back now. So thank you very much for hanging in there with us. And so you can find us on YouTube if that's where you're listening or watching us now. We appreciate it. And of course, on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you very much for all the support. So, Tony, who do we have with us today?
Yes, Russ. Want to thank everybody for listening again. Like Russ said, appreciate the time you take, and I hope you get a little something out of all the guests that we have. So, our next guest, the best way to describe this gentleman would be he's the keystone member of Montgomery County Fire Rescue. All the interviews we've done up to this point have mentioned this individual some form of way because that's how foundational this gentleman is. I only worked with him for a short time, but he left an impact on me and he left an impact on a lot of people. Very positive, but a lot of things we do today in 2025 or 2026 rather, is because this gentleman set the foundation, set the wheels in motion to make it all work. And he retired with 35 years of service, retired as a battalion chief. He's threaded all through Montgomery County Fire Rescue. I mean, I could sit here for 10 minutes and describe some of the things he was involved in, all the things that he did, but it just wouldn't do him justice. I'm gonna let him do the talking. So without further ado, one of the foundational members of Montgomery County Fire Rescue Services, Chief Monte Fitch. Thanks for coming, brother.
Welcome. Thank you guys for interviewing and looking back.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us. And you retired before I had the pleasure of meeting you because I was hired in 2005. And I got to know your son, and a lot of people working now may know your son, who also recently retired about a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But I never got to know you, so I'm very much looking forward to talking with you. Like Tony said before we started recording, heard a lot of great things about you from a lot of people. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we usually always start with people telling us about their childhood. So tell us a little bit about where you were born and what life was like growing up for you.
Well, lived in the western part of the United States. I was born in Fort Collins, Colorado in 1943, which is a little bit earlier than you guys started. I grew up in the National Park Service because my father was a park ranger. So we lived in different national parks. So I guess the first park we lived in was Mesa Verde. And I guess where I got my first inclination about the fire service was when I was less than the first grade in school. They had a big fire in the park that burned down one of the concession buildings. And my father went to that fire. And we went down and looked at that fire later and talked about it. And all during his career, when we were growing up, he was involved with wildland firefighting all over the western part of the United States. And he would leave the house, get on an airplane, go to some place on a reservation, pick up a crew of Indians, go someplace in the western part of the country and fight fires. So firefighting was in my life from my childhood. He was a part of it. He always went into the towns that were near the Park Service and introduced himself to the volunteer fire departments or whatever fire department was there. So if they ever needed to help each other, they knew each other. So my life started at the very beginning of my early ages, knowing about the fire department, knowing the importance of it and the service they provide and how important it is to the community.
That's great. That's awesome. Especially wildland firefighting. That's no joke right there.
That jumps into later, I guess, because when I graduated from high school, my first summer, I was hired by the National Park Service as a wildland firefighter in Saguaro National Monument, it's a mountain actually in Tucson where goes from desert saguaro cactus up into ponderosa pine. And they needed a fire crew up on top of the mountain to fight any lightning strike fires that were up there. There was no roads up there. It was trails. You walk by trail from ground level desert up into ponderosa pine, which is about 6,000 feet climb. He did it by trail, and it was a long hike, but we worked up there all summer. I was there for a month by myself, and then they brought a crew up, and we had a couple fires up there. The only way you could get any supplies was by helicopter or horseback.
Oh, wow.
So they were bringing up some hay and stuff for the horses by helicopter. So there was a lightning strike up on top of the mountain a little further up. They flew two of us up there with a couple hand saws, some axes, and some shovels, no water. And they hovered over the ground, about 10 feet above the ground and said, jump into the bush. So we jumped into a bush and they flew away. And then the two of us walked down the hill to where the fire was and did the job of putting the fire out. I did that summer. The second summer, I got hired at Bandelier National Park as a fire control aide. And when there wasn't a fire, we spent most of the time on horseback in the backcountry. The ponderosa pines were dying because of bark beetles. And we would climb the trees with climbers, with spurs, take the wire down, roll it up on a roller, put it on a mule, and we'd pack it out. We did that all summer and worked on trails and spent time in the backcountry with horses and cabins. And if there was a fire, we would hike to the fire and put the fire out. The third summer, I guess, in between that, I joined the Volunteer Fire Department in Kensington, and I was a member at 21 there in 1963. And in 1964, I went to work for the California Division of Forestry for the summer. We had some pretty good experience there. Their way of firefighting there is so different. It's such a huge amount of equipment that goes because their fires are so big, so quick.
Yeah.
And that was a great summer. I learned a lot of things. They do their hoses in donut rolls. And when you get to the fire, you unroll each one and hook them together and run up the mountain. So that was the beginning of my wildland fires. And I got hired in Montgomery County in 1965 at Hillandale.
How did you get from California back to, how did you get to Maryland? Because you're in Colorado and you're basically a cowboy up there, horseback, climbing trees.
Well, when I was in high school, I graduated from high school in Arizona, in Ajo, and then I drove my car to Saguaro. It was 100 miles. I parked the car, and then I would walk up the mountain and work. And then I drove back to Maryland. When my parents moved back to Maryland, I drove my car to Maryland. And then the next summer, I drove back out to Bandelier. And then, no, I take that back. I flew from BWI to New Mexico. And then I got on a small plane and they flew me up to Los Alamos. And then I didn't have a car all summer. We just worked. About two of us were living in trailers, and we would have horses and we'd ride back in the backcountry. And then I flew back home. And the third summer I drove from Maryland to California, did my job. I went to Reno, and after the summer was over, and I worked there as a bricklayer, a hod guy with my uncle got me a job for a little bit. And at Christmas I flew home. So when I got home, and in between all this, like I'm going to Montgomery College in the winter, I meet Becky, my wife, my now present wife. So we got together, and then I went to California. Well, I flew home to be home at Christmas. We got back together. In February, I decided, I think we're pretty happy together. Maybe we should get engaged. So I asked her to marry me. So my car was still in Reno. So my dad got me a ride on a Mayflower moving van.
Right.
And I rode with a Mayflower moving van, worked my way across the country as he hauled stuff from here to there all over the country. Got my car in Reno and drove home. And in June of 26, Becky and I got married. In July of 65, the same year, I got hired by Hillandale. So a lot of fun, a lot of neat things happened in between that.
I don't want to. There's a lot in between there, man.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of stories at each park.
Yeah. So what did you do? So you said he got you a ride on so you kind of like got on different U-Hauls to get there, or did you work everywhere you went, making yourself across the country? I rode with the same man in a Mayflower truck, and he had different jobs, different places, like down in the Carolinas, down in Tennessee. He had a job out in Arkansas in the middle of the winter, and he stopped along the road to take a nap because he was tired, and he slept in the sleeper, and I slept on the seat in the front, and like I froze to death. I didn't have any blanket. So then we went down to El Paso. He had a job there, and then he had a job in San Francisco, and then I flew from San Francisco to Reno. So I worked all summer getting there with him, or all spring with him getting there. It was an interesting job, and it was a different life to watch how those guys work. And okay, that's crazy.
So I didn't earn any money. I just got a free ride.
That was just the ride was the.
Yeah, man, you were not scared to travel at all.
No. I grew up traveling because every place we went when we lived out west, everything was a long ways away. Like in high school, I was 35 miles from high school. I drove every day. And when I took my freshman year in high school and we lived in Big Bend, it was 100 miles to school because they didn't have a high school in the park. So I boarded out my freshman year of high school with some people 100 miles from home, my freshman year of high school. So a lot of different experiences growing up in the West and that kind of life.
Yeah.
That's the foundation that I got by seeing a lot of things, seeing a lot of country, seeing a lot of people, living in different environments kind of helped me for later in life when I was settling down here and seeing different people and trying to understand their life.
Yeah, that's amazing because you've literally met all types of people from everywhere. I mean,
yeah, the Indian reservation, that was a good one. The reservations.
Well, when I was in the first grade, all the schools I went to when they lived in the parks were either a one-room school or no school. And when I was in the first grade, a lot of the kids were Navajo because their fathers worked in the park. And so I learned some Navajo then. I've forgotten a lot of it now, but they taught me how to do some of the dances. And I would go visit my grandfather, and the only thing he ever wanted me to do was show him the dances, and we danced all 11 in the living room. But that was a neat experience growing up with the kids.
That's really cool.
That is
really
cool, man. That's so different than around here, man. Wow.
Oh yeah. All the school experiences that I had all the way through were one-room schoolhouses. Like the one we had in Big Bend was one room, had a bamboo curtain between that separated the first grade through the fifth grade. The sixth and seventh and eighth grades were on the other side. And there was like one person or two people in each class. And the teachers would come and live in the back of the school. And each year was a different teacher. And so then just the education I had was very different than you have today, what you think about here, because it was one-room schoolhouses, potbelly stoves. In North Dakota, we lived up there at Theodore Roosevelt. The high school and the elementary school was one building with 4 rooms, first through high school.
Mm.
Wow.
So,
wow, that is super unique.
That's
it's
incredible.
a lot of different parts of the country, and you talk about different ways of life and different environments that people live, and it's good for your background to know these things. It helps when people talk about stuff, you understand what they're saying.
Absolutely, you can really relate.
That has nothing to do with the fire department. That's kind of a foundation, though, of where I came from.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
good. Yeah. That's
and
really
then we decided to go to. I thought, well, I'll go to Montgomery College, and since I thought I was going to go to college, so I went to MC at Tacoma Park, and that's where I met Becky. That was the best thing I ever did. Yeah, this June we'll be married 61 years. So,
wow.
Fantastic.
That is.
Yeah, she's been a supporter of my career, stronger than anybody around, and then of course supporting Monte and through his career.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
For sure. Now, with that extensive wildland firefighting background, what made you decide to switch to structural firefighting? I mean, I know obviously here in the East, there's not a huge wildland firefighting contingent, but what made you want to do structural firefighting?
Well, when we first moved back here, like we used to go up to the corner with the car and pick up my dad. He went to work he was the National Park Service here, and he would ride the bus home from downtown. And one night we were picking him up, and Kensington had a fire. There was a car on fire, or something was on fire, and the guy that was driving the engine didn't know how to put it in pump gear. So my dad went over to the pump and looked at it, and he put it in pump gear for him. And he says, "Why don't you join the Volunteer Fire Department and be a part of that?" And that's when I joined Kensington and got involved with them. And I was with them for about 3 years till I got hired. But that's where I got my basic for learning for structural firefighting and got the interest in it. And I really intended on continuing my life out west in the Park Service, being a park ranger. But once I got hired here and met Becky and we got married, I was very happy with what I was doing in the firefighter for structural firefighting and all the things here. And I loved the life. I loved the job. I loved the challenge. I loved the guys I was working with. I was very, very fortunate to have worked with people who challenged me. I mean, a lot. They challenged you in a different way then. And I'll just leave it there. But that was my interest started when he told me to join the Volunteer Fire Department. That's when I ended up staying here.
Okay, so you get hired by the Kensington Corporation. So how many paid guys did they have at that point when you started?
Well, when I was a volunteer at Kensington, I was a volunteer there. I wasn't hired. I was hired by Hillandale later. But at Kensington, there was probably, I think there was about 5 guys that worked at Station 21. And there was one of them that was a night man. They always had the night man that stayed there. And he slept in the watch office. There was a little fold-out bunk. But in the daytime, there was like 5 guys. There was 2 for the ambulance and 3 for the engine. And of course, all the engines then at Kensington were open cab, no seat belts, no tops. You rode on the back step. Your breathing apparatus was up in the hose bed, and you jumped on. And as you were going down the road, you helped each other get dressed. You would slide the Scott over your shoulders, over your head, and bounce your way down the road, hanging on tight. And somebody said, "Well, what if you fell off?" I said, "You didn't fall off. You get hurt. So you stay, you hung on.
Don't fall off, right? Don't fall off.
Don't fall off." The lessons learned very quick.
Yeah.
But there was, like when I got hired at Hillandale, they put a number on your helmet, and it was like P for paid, and my number was 14. So I was the 14th guy hired at Hillandale. And 24 hadn't opened yet. They were just opening that station when I got hired.
So what was that like working at Hillandale? Or was it different a lot from what you knew at Kensington?
Yeah, because there was some structure. There was a lot more structure there. Kensington, I didn't have any gear. I used to use whoever's paid gear was off that day. They'd let me use their gear.
Oh, wow.
And then I think at one point I didn't have any bunker pants. Becky bought me a set of bunker pants from Glenn D. Colbert. So I had a pair of pants, but I always used some of the paid men's gear because I didn't have any gear. And at Hillandale, of course, you had all your gear assigned to you, and you started probation. One of the questions you asked, I think you said something about maybe asking, it was, how was the training academy? There wasn't a training academy at that point. They hadn't built it. Your training academy was in the station, and you had a probationary package, and you went through the probationary package. They would take you out and show you how to lay out hose, how to pack the hose, how to wear your mask, clean the fire trucks, clean the fire trucks, clean the fire trucks, clean the station, wax the floors, wash the floors. I mean, and all that stuff. That you did a lot of that because
you did.
They were all volunteer stations in the weekends and at nights, and you had to have it looking good when they came in to make sure everything was looking good, and the stuff was all shiny and fueled up. You washed their cars and all that kind of stuff. But the guys I worked with, they had one sergeant at each house when they opened 24. Sergeant Folks, Tommy Folks was at 24, and Charlie Furdock was at 12, and Tom Mulligan was the lieutenant. And so he was a senior career officer. And then they partnered you up with one other person who'd been in the firehouse for a while. So my partner was Ronnie Folks. He was my first partner. You probably heard of him, Wrenches. Mm-hmm. He was really, really good. He was a good mechanic, but he was a great driver. And he taught me a lot about pumps and how to run the pumps. He taught me how to drive. He was also a race car driver. He drove street rods or rails. And wow. So, yeah. But then at Hillandale, when you were hired at nighttime, there was just two of you on the shift. And sometimes you would just go out with the two of you, or you'd wait until the siren quit blowing and a volunteer would come in and go in the unit with you. Of course, that was all open cabs then, but they did have some seat belts by then. But you'd ride along down the road and you'd be there, and maybe you'd be the only two people for the first few minutes of fighting a fire. But I learned a lot there. And Tom Mulligan, the captain, was, if you talk about mentors, he was probably a mentor for me because he was very strict with what we learned and what we did. And he taught us how to do things the right way and how to make things work. So when you knew your job. So when you went out there, you didn't have to figure out how to pull the line or how to put a mask on. That was all basic stuff. You didn't even think about it. You just did it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Muscle memory.
No doubt. So you working at Hillandale. How long did you work there before you moved from there?
I worked at Hillandale for 7 years. After 24 opened, they had to hire a bunch of people. So I got transferred up to 24, and I worked up there with they stay with 2-man shifts at nighttime. So I worked there until 1971. And Sandy Spring had lost Eldridge Pier because he had a stroke on a brush fire. So they were going to open up Station 40, was going to be a new station, and they were going to hire 2 sergeants and a lieutenant. And so I applied and took the test for the sergeant there. And I guess the reason I decided to do that is because it was a change in the location. It sounded like it was a good opportunity to maybe get some promotion for rank. So I applied for it, took the written test, took the practical test, and which is kind of an interesting fact. Excuse me. One of the things that kind of stands out is one of the practical tests was a structural fire across the street at the 2-story building that where Lucille's and the store was. And the person who was giving the test was Sonny Scarf. I don't know if you've heard of Sonny Scarf, but he was a DC firefighter. He was a PG captain for a long time. He was one of those firefighters that he was a god in the fire service.
Wow.
And they'd ask him to come up and do the practical part of the test. So I knew he was a truck company man. So he said, well, what would you do if that place was on fire? You're standing out in the street. You're not in paper, nothing. No, he says, this building's on fire. It's 2:00 in the morning. What are you going to do? And so I talked to him about getting the building open, getting it laddered, doing rescues, stuff like that, calling for help. But it was a neat time because I knew Sonny for a long time, and he became very involved with Marriott and their sprinkler systems later. But I got to learn some stuff and work with some people that were foundations. You talk about a foundation and cornerstones. I worked with some people that were the building blocks for Montgomery County where they are today. David Gratz.
Yeah, David Gratz. Yep.
So many people. Warren Isman. Yeah, Frank Brannigan, who taught building codes and construction in the fire service.
Book, yeah. Promotional. They still read that promotional.
Yes.
Well, some of the pictures he had and some of the books were pictures that I took and he took and put them in his book. But he was the first instructor for the fire science program for Montgomery College at Rockville. And I took the very first fire science class they taught. I said, well, this is a good time to get in because they're going to give one class a semester. And if I can do one class a semester and work, because I had 3 part-time jobs because the fire service didn't pay you anything.
That's what
my salary when I started was $5,600 a year.
Oh my God. Okay,
Wow.
let's take a moment. You said
$600 a year. And he had just gotten a raise, and we were on a state retirement at that time. And so you didn't make much money. People make that today in overtime in a couple of weeks. We made it in a whole year. So wow. I worked as a school bus driver. I worked for a landscape company. It's just different things to try to make up the money that you could because you were working your days off like they do today. It's the same thing. It's just the different amount of money you make during your career. It seems like you're always trying to catch up with the style of life that's always ahead of you. You never quite catch up. You guys experienced that. You know that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yep.
What was the schedule what was it, 24/48? What was the schedule?
Well, a lot of the schedule when I first started, and a lot of times during my career, I worked a lot of day work. But at Hillandale, we worked 3, 3, and 3, 3 days on, 3 days off, and 3 nights. So it seemed like you were always getting ready to go to work or coming home from work. Mm-hmm. And then much later on, it changed to a 24/48. But there was still a lot of day work in this county. But 3, 3, and 3 is what I was working there at Hillandale. Wow. And then when I went to Sandy Spring, the other sergeant that was hired was Dennis McLaughlin. I think you've heard that name a few times. Dennis
McLaughlin, absolutely.
Yeah, Dennis was a sergeant, and he had worked for NSA, and he was a volunteer at Rockville, and he was a great good guy. He was an excellent driver, and he was a wonderful a good firefighter. And he would work at 40, and I would work at 4, and we worked day work, and then we'd had one person work night work. There'd be one driver for the engine at night work, or to get the ambulance out or whatever. And every 6 months, we would switch 4/40. I would go to 40, he'd go to 4. But in the beginning, when Dennis and I first got hired, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. When Dennis and I first got hired, Dick Foster was hired as the lieutenant, the senior career officer, and he was a DC firefighter.
Sure.
He was a great baseball player with the Volunteers, with the Silver Spring, and you talk about a mentor. He was probably the strongest mentor that I had throughout my whole rest of my career because I worked and interwove with him in many different aspects of our job the rest of my career. But he was a no-nonsense guy. When you were working, you did your job. If you screwed up, he gave you what for the next day or that night. He'd drink a beer with you. I mean, he understood how to make people get their job done. He knew hydraulics, so he put all the guys together in a room upstairs, and he taught all the masters. Well, they were technicians and they weren't masters. Mm-hmm. And he taught them how hydraulics and how to do the pumps. And it was kind of interesting. He gave a test one day when the hydraulic class was through, and it was a 2-page test, a lot of questions, a lot of math. And he said, read the whole test before you answer any questions. The last question, and the only question he wanted answers, what day's payday?
Yeah.
So if you worked all your way through and all these questions, you got to the end, he didn't care about that. He knew you knew your job. He knew you knew your stuff because he worked with you. He just wanted to know if you were following directions. Read the whole paper first, answer the last question. And he was that way through his whole career. He was a man ahead of time. When he was there, he sent Terry Howard. Dennis went on to work at the fire marshal's office, and Terry Howard came from Silver Spring. And Dick had heard about the class at the National Fire Academy on incident command. So he went, he liked it. He thought, well, Terry, you and Lenny need to both go. So he'd sent us one at a time. For a week, you went to the National Fire Academy and you stayed there and you learned incident command from an instructor who was called Lucian Amundi. He was a retired chief from New York City. One of the best things I ever did. Right. When he came back from that, he wanted to spread that through the county. And so he had Terry and I go to different fire stations and talk to the volunteers about incident command and how to do incident command. He made up some little plastic vests that said sectors on it those are the beginning of incident command in Montgomery County. He started all that by going to the National Fire Academy, and that changed, and that started following through to what it is today, into it dominates the fire service today, incident command.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
That was the beginning of it in Montgomery County.
For sure. So I know this little history here. When did you get involved? I know you, I can't think of his name. God, it's the doctor that invented the
Paul Davis?
Yep. Davis, that invented the combat challenge. You're the first person who went through that.
Well, when we were working in Sandy Spring, Dick Chief Foster had heard something about he was going to do some kind of a test with firefighters. So Paul Davis had sent out a questionnaire to all the metropolitan fire departments. He wanted 100 firefighters. He was writing a master's degree on the stress and what a firefighter really goes through and how their physical fitness and their strength makes a difference in their job. So Foster said, "You're going." So I went over there, and there was a lot of physical training. You ran the track. You had to meet a period of time in the track. He had an obstacle course, which is pretty much the same as the combat challenge today, but it was a lot more rustic. You had to extend a 35-foot ladder. You're wearing full protective clothing in a bottle. You're not breathing air, but you're wearing a full bottle. You send a 35-foot ladder up. You take a hose pack up to the 5th floor. You drop it down. You raise another hose pack up the window. You come down. You chop, and then you drag a body. And that was very grueling, but I thought it was like everything you do in the fire service. You do the best you can, and you do it as hard as you can. And I did the whole competition in 5 minutes. And that's the first time he'd ever had anybody go that fast. And I didn't lose that record, I guess, if you want to call that, for quite a while. And then there was a little guy from DC. He kicked my ass. Yeah. So what that ended up being was he also had you on the treadmill at the university wearing a mask, and he measured the amount of oxygen it took you to run for a certain period of time to get to a certain level and all that. But what it ended up being was he started the combat challenge, which was challenging different fire departments to send people to see who could do this same kind of a thing just for kind of a fun competition. And he struggled for a long time trying to get the fire service to make that part of the standard for hiring. And that was very not welcomed, of course, by the union, because it was a threat to keeping people hired and not hiring people. Right. But through court battles and through many negotiations, it ended up being a standard. They changed it a little bit around. And it ended up being a standard, which I was very excited about later on. Even after I was retired, it became a hiring standard, because now it gave you a standard to bring people in, because he wanted to prove how important physical fitness was and your aerobic ability to do your job. Right. And I think that one of the things that you talk about, the tools in the fire service, every piece of equipment has tools that are very important to each specific job. But the most important tool in all of your toolboxes is your physical fitness, Absolutely. Your mental stability, and your mental ability to combat what you see and feel and think and overcome. But if you're not in shape and you're not prepared and you can't think right, you're not going to be able to do your job. So you need to be in the best you can be to do what you have to do with all the things. The little saying that I have is that experience combined with knowledge gives you an edge. You can have a person who has all the knowledge in the world about the fire service. He's taken all the classes there are. He's seen all these things, but he's never done it. But you take a person who has experienced these things, he's educated, and he has an edge on everybody else, because now he has all these experiences of life that he's seen from other people, he's learned from other people, and then he combines that with what he's learned from college or school or other people, training academy, whatever, and he can do, he or she, it's not he all the time now, it's everybody, they could do a better job because they have a lot of tools in their toolbox and their body's ready to do the job. This job is very physically demanding, as you all know, and almost everybody I know that's retired suffers from some kind of problems, ailments, cancer, from what they've experienced through this job. But what gets you the furthest along the way is keeping yourself in shape to be able to do your job. That's the most important thing you do. My doctors told me probably the reason I'm still in as good a condition as I am today is because of what I did in the past. So your past dictates where you're going to go in the future. How long do you want to be here? A firefighter's life after he retires most of the time is 10 years. And that's because of the job and what it's done to you and how it beats you up, how it destroys families, the relationships and how it hurts you. So you got to prepare yourself for what's coming, because there's a lot of things, as you guys know, you see and you feel and experience that aren't good. But the good part is you're going to give somebody a better day on their worst day, because you're making it better for them, because you know how to do what you're supposed to do and you do it right.
Amen.
Be proud of your job. Represent your job when you're off duty and you're out riding around and you're doing something stupid, or you get drunk and you get in a fight, or you go to a bar, or you do something stupid, or you cut up somebody with your car and you got the fire department tag and union label. Well, they think that's the way firemen are. So when you're out there, look like you're supposed to look all the time. I mean, everybody's going to screw up. That's the way it is. But you got to just be the person who leads the way you want your life to be. You want to make it so you represent you guys. I want to make sure that when somebody sees me do something and they see you, they know that we're doing what we're supposed to do and not being an asshole out there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Because we've all done it. We've all done it.
So you're in Hillandale. How long did you stay at Hillandale before you wanted to promote up? Because I mean,
7 years.
Sergeant, you made
7 years. Yeah, I was there for 7 years.
Okay.
In 1971, they put the test out, and I went to Sandy Spring in 71. I stayed there, I think 15 or 17 years. I was a lieutenant.
Oh, wow.
So one time I was sitting down with somebody and they were having a problem and we were discussing problems. And he says, "You don't understand what it's like." I said, "I was a lieutenant for 17 years. I worked with some of the best and worst people you can ever be around." I said, "I think I understand your problem. Now get your shit together and go to work."
Exactly.
Yes.
What made you want to take the battalion chief's test or the captain's test or what? The lieutenant. Sorry, it's lieutenant at that time.
Well, then it was sergeants, and then they took the sergeants and they changed them over to lieutenants. They made the lieutenants captains for the station commander, not the station commander, the shift commander. So I took the captain's test, which was then like the captain over all the stations in their division. So I took the captain's test like 3 times, passed it, but I just didn't feel like going there was what I wanted to do. And I didn't feel like I was going to be making any benefits in salary. At that point, there wasn't a big change in what you were going to get for being promoted. So finally, at one point, I took it, passed it, and got promoted to captain. So I was then the captain of District 4, which was all the Kensington stations, Laytonsville, Sandy Springs, and Wheaton.
Like a battalion chief. Yeah.
Yes. And that was when they were called, they were battalion captains. They weren't battalion chiefs at that point. Didn't change that title till later on. So that the motivation, I guess, then was I thought it was time. Your body gets to start to wear out. You need to do something besides jump out of bed every night. And I thought, well, being in a car was probably a little bit better thing. Plus, I thought I had a chance to do some influence on making things better for other people. We were still very much under volunteer control at that point.
Right.
But like when I was at Kensington and I had to have the the buggy or the car, I had to go to whoever's duty chief that night was and pick up their car, take it to the firehouse at night, take it back, go home. So. Those were the volunteer issues from the time I was hired until 88 were very influential in the fire service. And there was a lot of discontent and unhappiness and who was the boss. And some guy that would put lettuce in Safeway at nighttime was now the fire chief at nighttime. And you wondered how this man knew how to tell us what to do when we were learning how to do our job and we were trained and going to classes.
Right.
So it was, and then they also had control over top of the captain or any career guys. The volunteer chief was in charge, and sometimes he'd come to the scene and he was drunk or whatever. So it's just there was a lot of issues, and we spent a lot of years, a lot of different people that have come and gone were involved in changing to get county hired by the county, and to have people hired and a fire chief hired with Tom Carr, one of the people in my life. He was hired as the first fire chief. We spent a lot of time talking to different corporations, different people, sitting down trying to get captains on shift work, because I said, we need supervision at nighttime, daytime, and all the time. We need to be controlling our people, not somebody's out there from a lettuce place telling us what to do.
Right.
Yeah. So that happened for a lot of involvement and a lot of talking and a lot of meetings. And that also brought about the Career Officers Association.
Yeah.
And you go back to Hillandale when the union first started. We can talk about that in a minute, but the Career Officers Association was kind of founded and started by Dalton, Foster, Best, several other guys, just to try to get us some representative for the county government. When things would happen, we could go in there as a group and say, this is not right. This doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason that the union started probably in 1966 or 67. I don't remember what year the union kind of started, but it was called the Firefighters Association first. Bethesda had a group that was a Firefighters Association. We had a group called Firefighters Association. The union wasn't formed yet. And we finally got together and made it the IAFFF, and they joined together. And there was some resistance to that from Bethesda first, because they wanted to be what they were. And finally, we all joined as one group. And I was the first sergeant of arms at Hillandale when we first started the union.
What was that like?
Well, you kind of just went to the meetings, you talked about what you'd like to do, and then you realized you weren't going to be able to do much of anything until the volunteer corporations told you couldn't.
Right.
Wow.
And the union,
Yeah.
the union actually became a very strong working tool to get us where we had to go. I think sometimes today, I think they have too much influence over management. I think management needs to manage, but they're very important part of the firefighter. And I would encourage every firefighter to be part of the local and to be active in your local, and to help make your job better and get your benefits better.
Mm-hmm.
But don't trade all your benefits away for getting out early, because you got a lot of life after that. Anyway, there's a lot of stories there.
Yes. Yes. So
they were influential. I worked a lot with Sparks and the union when they were going in back in the some of the beginning. The guy that was our captain, he was the first union guy. So Mulligan, he was one of the first leaders in the union, and he was an officer then. So it was a lot different then.
Right.
So from my perspective, at least, I think our union is very influential, and they do a lot. What, in your opinion, what helped make our union be as powerful and effective as it is? Is it just the involvement of the people that were there? Because I've heard that there's some unions somewhere that aren't as powerful or effective. So, yeah,
I think probably the ability to have a group of people that were firefighters as one voice is what made the biggest difference. Before, we were Hillandale, Sandy Springs, Rockville, Kensington, trying to tell somebody what to do, and nobody cared. But as a group of guys together that made the union, you had one voice, and that one voice represented all the firefighters that were working in the county. And in those days, most of the people who worked in the county lived in the county. So that was a vote for the council. That was a vote for whoever was going to be in office. These guys out there voted for us. And to get their vote was important. And to have this firefighter union behind us and support us for being elected became an important voice. And it became stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think it's because we were one group who were asking for the same thing. It made it work. Plus, we had some pretty good officers in the union that were leaders that looked where they wanted to go and how they wanted to get us to have a better life and better retirement and better pay, better benefits. I think Chief Gratz was probably one of the ones that when he first became the first director, he gave us some of the first benefits we had. He went from a state retirement to the county retirement. They got us a pay raise. He got the communication guys into a different class, a different pay raise. A lot of things like that were started by these people who began in in the 60s and 70s who built the foundation, the building blocks, as you call them, for what we have today. I think Montgomery County is a very, very good fire department, very well recognized all over the country, all over the world, because so many people who have worked here have gone to other places and kept on building what they've learned from this place and spread it around. It's like a tree with great roots. The roots are very strong, but the branches have been everywhere.
So what was it like when we've asked, I think we had one or two guests that were hired prior to the county taking over. What was that like leading up to 1988? And what was the thought process as a supervisor? And then people under you thinking they're going to quit or what's going to happen. There was a lot of fear and depredation of what exactly was going to be the next step with the county taking over. What was that like?
Well, when you got hired, you were hired by the individual corporations. You worked for the corporation, and you couldn't work for. If I was hired at Hillandale, I couldn't work at Silver Spring. I couldn't work at any place else unless you quit. Like when I left Hillandale to go to Sandy Springs, I had to sign a paper. I was leaving there and going to work at Sandy Springs. The discipline was all done within corporations. So if you went out there and did something wrong, the corporations could suspend you, fine you, take days off, whatever. The discipline was inconsistent depending on corporations. There was some in places, the volunteers would do something that nothing happened. We do something, we get, disciplined.
Right.
That kind of stuff. I think that maybe some of the fear that the guys had when they first got hired was they were not sure what the county was going to do with them, what was going to happen. And there was probably some intimidation. They gave it an option to get out. They got a bonus for getting out in 88. I don't know. I think most of us were for it because we thought it was going to be better for all of us because now we were going to be working for one county government instead of all the individual corporations.
Right.
Yeah. It was very different working for the corporations. It was good in many ways. They took care of you in many ways. If there was somebody needed something, they would help you. Many of the volunteers that we worked with were really, really good people. Mm-hmm. It was good to work with them. I think when I took one of the things I had to do when I took the sergeant's test was an interview board, and Glenn Darnell was the chief at Laytonsville at that point, volunteer chief. And he said, well, do you want to teach the volunteers what to do? And I said, of course. I said, we're going to be on the fire together. And if I don't teach them what I know and I fall down, who's going to take me out? They're as important as I am on a working fire or a crash or whatever. I said, I'm going to teach them everything I know because I want them to be as good as I am because they may save my ass.
Right.
And that I still believe that.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
We kind of jump around a little bit because there's so many things that it's like this tree, man, we're on one branch and we jump over here like a bird from branch to branch. Yeah. So you need to keep me back in line once in a while.
No, you're good. You're good.
You're doing great.
You're a battalion chief or a captain, and the county takes over. The county's taking over now. I mean, it was a lot getting ready to. I know you guys. The whole buildup was trying to get a one fire chief. I remember. Was it question E? Is that what it was?
Yeah, there was bills and it was questions, but I think question E was the final one that got us to be a fire chief. Have a fire chief.
Okay. What was it like? Because you was involved a lot, and a lot of that you was running around, but you was still involved. What was it like up there getting ready for that to come out? Was there, because Gordon was assisting with that too at that time. He was a major push for that, and he helped a lot in that.
Who was that?
Gordon Aguilar.
Oh yeah. Oh my word. Yeah. He was a director. Gordon was probably, and I still keep in touch with him a little bit, but he was probably one of the people who probably got Montgomery County Fire Department step ahead of where they were going to be. He developed budgets. He developed plans, a strategic plan for where we were going to go. And a lot of people kind of thought, well, he's not helping us now. But what he did is he set up the foundations for later with money and budgets and plans and a way to go, a direction to go. He was not familiar with the fire service much because he was the director for Right On. Mm-hmm. But when he came in, he wanted to learn, and he rode with me several times to look, but he was always eager to learn about what the fire service does. And he would go out at night and he would go with us to see what we did and how we did it. He was involved with the training academy. When we went to Oklahoma, he was right at the academy to help support us. He and Bruce Romer and Doug Duncan were very, very supportive of the fire service. We had a very close relationship with them. They helped us a lot. And of course, this is a bunch after we were county employees. But I think the county could help us in a lot of ways to be a better service, because it gave us more strength. It gave us more support. Yeah.
Nice.
There's a lot of different things you can go from that. being a captain or a battalion chief later called in the beginning was a challenge in some ways because of the responsibility you had, but the authority to do what you had to do was not always there. And until we were really a county employee, until Tom was the fire chief, we didn't have a boss that was over top of us to say, you're not going to do this, or that can't do that to you. You can't do this, or we're going to do this to you. And until they finally decided to make battalion chiefs, which was much, much later, an authority over the volunteer chief, the battalion chief still had the volunteer chief tell them what to do. And I think that was one of the biggest steps we could take, is making a battalion chief senior to the volunteer chiefs, because this is his job. This is what they do.
Right.
So there was a lot of tussle, hassles, a lot of comments. I'm sure you talked to almost anybody that was involved in that period of time. It was a strong struggle. I remember him sitting down at one point with three guys from Kensington that were the chief officers. One of them was a DC policeman. And we were trying to talk them into making the captains on shift work. I said, we need the captains on shift work here because our guys work 24 hours a day. We need somebody to supervise them at night. If you don't like what they do, I can help you fix it. But I can't fix it if you're telling what to do and I can't get involved in it. And we met for quite a few meetings, and it was some of the best people I thought were on our side, kind of stabbed us in the back and went against us. So it took a lot of fighting and a lot of meetings to get around that, to get a fire chief, a county fire chief. For those who fought for it for all those years, Tom Carr was a blessing.
Yeah, Tom.
And I worked with Tom when he was at Sandy Spring. He was a paramedic at Sandy Spring. And he and Hipponia Joe, some of those guys that were there, Denise Fox, all those names that you know that were there, the paramedics, Nelson Irie, Jeff Anderson. That was the beginning of the paramedic program too. And now we're jumping back again, but the Heartmobile with Mary Beth Micus and Jake Gratz, who trying to say, we need to have a machine. All these guys are having heart attacks. We need to do something besides take them to the hospital real quick in the back of the Cadillac ambulance and put them in the hospital. So the beginning of first aid was all we had in the beginning. And then we went to EMT. Then we took the paramedic programs. So that was all beginning too with the Heartmobile, and the beginning of how we do first aid and the importance of first aid in the fire service was all started probably EMT. The first EMT class I had was I went to Sandy Springs. So it was probably a 72, something like that. We took the class at Rockville.
Not everybody was the EMT. Did they make you be it, or you could do it if you wanted to at that point?
In the beginning, you could kind of apply to do it, but not much longer after that, everybody needed to be an EMT. And the beginning firefighters were hired to be EMTs.
Okay. So what would you do on a call if you had an EMS call back in those days? You would just pick them up in the Cadillac, you said, put them in the back, and then take them to the nearest hospital? Is that all you did for accidents, or how did
we had we had learned a little bit of CPR. I'm sorry, when I remember the first CPR class that we had, because I took my first aid class. The very first aid class was at Wheaton Rescue Squad. Becky and I both took it together. Okay. Took a first aid class from Wheaton Rescue Squad. So you had basic bandaging and splinting and some CPR kind of a thing, where you turn them over, beat on their back, and hope they lived. But later on, they actually taught us CPR. And when I went to work for California Division of Forestry, I had CPR. But I went out there, and the guys hadn't learned CPR yet. They didn't. Probably there was some places in the cities they had it, but at the firefighting station I was at for the wildland fires, they hadn't learned CPR. And we ran a call one day for a drowning down in the river. and the family had pulled the guy out of the river. And I said, let's do CPR. And they didn't know what CPR was. So we actually showed them the guys on the rocks. We did CPR. And of course, the first pressure we did, we broke the ribs, crack. And I said, and I knew mouth to mouth wasn't going to be a lot of fun with this guy. So I said to the brother, I said, you're closer to him. You do the breathing. So we pushed down, and he did the mouth to mouth. And of course, the guy threw up, and the first bunch came up and hit him in the face.
Oh, no.
But we did CPR on this guy for probably 30 minutes because the closest ambulance was about an hour and 45 minutes away. But that was the first CPR I'd ever actually performed on a person. And we got back to the station, and the guy that was our supervisor, he went home and came back with a bottle of whiskey, and we each took a sugar of whiskey and washed our mouth out. Yeah. So that was my first actual CPR. Was in probably 1964, where I actually used it on somebody and taught somebody else how to use it.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the paramedic program basically now, we in the county wants to get a paramedic within 4 minutes to any location in the county, and they developed that. But our paramedic program has come a long way.
Oh my word! But the paramedic, and having a paramedic on every unit, at least one paramedic on most every unit. I guess that's what they're having now. It's great because now you can do life-saving measures while you're waiting for the other medic unit or the ambulance to come. You have the tools to do something right now, and the way they've changed CPR and improved it, and how it's saving people at a much higher rate than we did before. See how far we've come, what we've learned.
Yeah, and it's constantly evolving, constantly.
Yes,
and it's changing all the time. Yeah,
and that's good. That's the benefit of this whole job is we build on what somebody taught us. We make it better. We invent new tools. We invent new ways of doing things. Each person gets better, and they take that part from the guy before them and they give it to the next guy, and we make it into a better people. I mean, I'm so proud of the things that I've seen some of the people do. And going back to Monte for a minute, his technical knowledge far surpassed my knowledge of anything in the fire service. We were firefighters. We put out fires. We cut open cars with different tools. But the technical knowledge that you have to have today to do your specific jobs, and how it's so specialized with all the different specialty units and the specialty teams, high rescue, the angles, all that kind of stuff, the swift water people, the metro people, all that stuff. It's just, we've come so far, and this is Montgomery County, and look where we are compared to the rest of the country and the world. We're right there. We're at the top.
Right.
Yeah.
So coming up, I mean, you started, like I said, you're a foundational member. What was the impetus for these specialty teams? It was something that people wanted to learn, and then they wanted to be real good at that, and then get. How did that work? Developing. I know the hazmat team was beginning at 7 and all that, but I don't necessarily understand how they got to the rope, and then the underwater rescue, and then the collapse rescue that ended up being FEMA. How do those things kind of start?
Well, the people on the river down at Cabin John and 14, they work people on the river, so they had to know how to use the boats. So then the people that were, I guess, transferred there didn't know about it. So what they started doing is they started teaching people different parts about that. Well, then they did the metro, and they had to learn about the metro. So then they got a person, we need somebody in charge of metro training. So they put Eric Jacobs in charge of that for a while, so he could teach the training part, we could teach the river part. But there was not really any teams then. There were just people who kind of were in those stations that were running those calls that did it. I guess when they first got the first Hearst tools, and we were at station 4 and 40, and we trained out back with cars, and we started learning how to use the tool better. And then we said, well, let's put one of these on this. And then we just made it into a rescue squad. So the rescue squad's got tearing tools now that help to do auto extrication. And then it became more important. And then people would say, well, now this squad is important for this call. So that it kind of developed like a little seed. It grows from the beginning of a few tools to now there are people that are better at it, and they become specialized. So then they made swift water teams so that the people that went out on the water, if they were in Sandy Spring or wherever they had a boat, they were trained on how to do this stuff. They wore the right flotation devices. They had the equipment to do it with. So teams kind of evolved from individual corporations that had the jobs to do that. when people moved there, well, they need more people to know how to do this. So you learned how to do these jobs. You did the water training over there at, on the Potomac, where you did where they put you down the slide and sit you down and you have to rescue yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the Rockville developed a trench rescue team. Tommy thought it was important to have a trench rescue team to learn how to dig people, because people were getting buried in these trenches, and we would go dig them out. And we're lucky we didn't all lose somebody in the trench because it caved in on us.
Right.
So we developed a trench rescue team with a guy named Jim Gargan, came and taught us, who was a specialist in that. So Rockville developed a trench rescue team. Well, the squad and everything had it. And then we got Station 33, kept the equipment for it, and it got bigger and bigger. And then about that time, we were pretty good at that. Then FEMA started developing the task force to take care of collapses and bombings and earthquakes and stuff like that. So Tommy got involved with helping us to be part of FEMA. So we became the Maryland Task Force, for FEMA. But it all developed because the beginning of a trench rescue team, and then a collapse team, and then we joined FEMA. So it kind of just grows from a seed of a few ideas and a few new tools to people wanting to be part of a specialty team. And then he decided to start putting them, instead of had them all over the county, put them in different stations so they didn't have to draw so much equipment from all over. You're taking them from the certain stations where the specialty teams are. And that took a long time. That's a lot of growth and a lot of ideas and a lot of meetings to try to make things happen. Same thing with standards for firefighting. We didn't have a high-rise policy. We didn't have a standard operating procedure policy. Everybody just kind of put the fire out. But we were trying to get people to go to their position. And I think you remember, Tony, some of the times we talked to Eric and some of those people about just beating somebody there and being in the wrong place. Go to your assigned position, do your job.
Yeah.
And that came. And then, of course, incident command came. Somebody be in charge of the fire. Instead of everybody doing their own thing, you have an instant command system where there's now sectors where people are in charge of responsibility for different parts of the rescue or the fire. And it just grows. It grows from ideas and the beginning of things. And I was just very fortunate to be involved in a lot of the beginnings of everything.
Do you remember any pivotal incidents countywide that changed the trajectory of the county in either way? Like this, you can mark, because I know for me, 9/11 was a big, a big marker of when the fire department changed. Coming up in career, what was the things that, okay, from this, after that, everything went in a different direction?
Well, being county employees was one thing. But before that, I think what kind of got a lot of things kind of started was when the corporations, of course, didn't have the memberships they needed. They started missing calls. They wouldn't show up on a house fire, or they would show up with two people, or, something would happen, or someone would die in a fire. And so a few of us, and there's probably still stuff I won't talk about, but there was a few of us who were involved with finding out why the fire departments didn't want to have staffing around the clock. And there was a part in history called a guy named Sandy Golden.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote for the Journal, and he was starting to write articles about why the fire department didn't show up. And if they showed up, why they didn't come to the right place, or they went the wrong place, or they only had two people, or they didn't show up till the fire was too late. And I think that was a pivotal part in starting to get more career people working 24 hours a day, because you needed people on the fire trucks all the time, not just when they showed up. That was a big changing point, I think, is what he did in the fire service. So that was a point. The county chief was a point. Being county employees was a big changing point. Of course, 9/11 changed everything. And the biggest thing, I think, one of the questions maybe is, what did I feel after I retired? Well, that was the first year after I retired was 9/11. And for all those 35 years, I've been involved in doing something. When something happened, all of a sudden now I was sitting at home and I couldn't do anything. And it's a terrible feeling. Now, if you want to be able to help, but you can't. And I went down and one time even offered, I said, there's a bunch of us sitting out here that are retired. We can come in and for nothing, answer phones, do whatever you want us to do. Nobody ever called back. And it's like, when you're gone, they cut the throat off, man. You're done. You're out.
Wow.
You talk to Griff Livingston or some of those people who retired that were, those names. They were the people who built the fire service the way they are too.
Yeah.
And what Griff said one day is, he said, I retired and I thought I had a lot of friends. He said, but there's about 5 people who call and check and see how I'm doing. So the one thing I offer to anybody is keep in touch with people after you retire, see how they're doing, help them out, because that's kind of a tough time when you first leave. Is you're no longer a part of something that we were so much a part of, and so much. And I guess I can diverse a little bit on that, because one of the things I was telling some of the people that I worked with is this job is very important and it takes and demanding of you, but don't forget you have a family. Or if you don't have a family, you will have a family. And some point later down the road, you're not going to be working and you're going to need that family. And if you haven't built a relationship all your career with that person, now all of a sudden you're sitting at the breakfast table and you don't know what to say. You don't know them. So you have to know this person all your life, not just for a few minutes at the end of your life. So build your career, build your relationships at home. The family you have at the firehouse is very important. The family you have at home is even more important, because they're with you afterwards.
And that is, yeah. And that, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we can all know, and we all know, and people in the fire service know how all consuming the fire service can be. You know, when you're there, you give so much of it, you give so much of yourself to the job, and it requires a lot. And if you want to be good at the job, you know, you're thinking about it, you're studying, and even when you're off, you're thinking about, man, how can I get better? And if you're a supervisor, you're thinking about your people all the time. And yeah, it can be real easy to neglect the people that are there with you at home, you know, just waiting for you. But like you said, you don't want to retire, and then now you're with them all the time, and they're strangers to you.
Yeah. You know, I think about now. I was even talking to Becky about this the other day, and we were all the snow and ice is here today, and cold, and I'm here, and we're together. But I think of the many nights that we hauled wood in and stacked it up in the house for the stove, and I'd get in the car and leave. I'd be gone, and she had 3 kids, and I think about how hard that was on them, and I didn't probably even realize it. I just knew I had to be at work, but they're suffering through what you're gone, and they're alone. If something, if the power goes off, the kids get sick, and you're down there, you're waiting there. And I did that to her many times for meetings and for stuff, and it was good for the career, but it was tough on the family. A lot of Christmases, a lot of birthdays.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're a battalion chief. You're rolling through. You worked in Battalion 5. You worked at several. You have close to 30 years in. What makes you think about, when do you think it's time for you to retire, or how does that come about, the thought process?
That's a tough decision, because I think so many guys who retired on disability weren't ready to go yet. And it was a tough time for them because they were wanting to still be at work and they were good at what they did. You think about Steve Hobbs and just so many guys that I know that Mike Suter and those guys are retired on disability, and they go out before they're ready. Well, I think sometimes you have to be mentally prepared to retire, to leave this, and you have to weigh the options of staying or not staying. One of the options that makes it better is now you're working for less money than you were if you were off, because your salary is better if you're off than if you're working, because it's just a better deal. And I think things change. The way things are done changes, and it's not quite the same as what you did. Some of the people change, not that it's good or bad, and the way things are done is a little different. And I think that all those things add up together, and it kind of pushes you to a point. You say, I think, it's time for somebody else to do this. I love it. I would do the operational part forever, but your body also tells you it's time, because you just can't keep doing what you do. And so it's a period of mental being ready. Physically, you're ready, because you can't do what you did. You can't jump out of bed at night. You can't run down there. You can't climb the stairs. You can't climb a ladder like you did. You can't pull a hose line. You can't breathe. There's no oxygen left in your lungs anymore. You've already screwed those up. So it's a combination of what you've done, how you feel, your family, your lifestyle. It just finally says, time to go.
Do you remember
work for back there?
Yeah. Do you remember your last shift?
Kind of. One thing I remember is I still had the car. I hadn't turned that in yet. I was going to give that to Andy Johnson. He was going to take my place. But I was on the way home. I was going up 270, and they put out a brush fire and a car fire on the Clarksburg Road right there, just off right where the Clarksburg is now. So I thought, well, I'm going to stop here. So I just went in and took the guy's garden hose and put the fire out. And I called in that day and says, this is me signing off. I'm done. But that was the last day. I had a little fire on the way home. But it was tough. It was excited to be home, glad to be here. But it was time.
Gotcha. I'm going to pause it real quick because I don't know why we lost Tony. What happened?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I have something I'll share with you that kind of it hung in my office,
Okay.
and it says, so you think you want to be a firefighter? You must be dedicated to the job and to your family, have the highest level of integrity, be honest with yourself and others, be ethical, do not abuse the power and authority of personal gain or good, demonstrate courage, willingness to sacrifice for others first, never for self, be physically and aerobically in shape, be mentally prepared, train to do the job. Training and experience give you the edge. Learn from your mistakes. You're not a hero. You're just doing your job you were trained to do. That's me. And I think if you follow those things, it's an easy job. It's the best job in the world.
No doubt.
And it's the job that you probably, hopefully, that it's on somebody's worst day, you're making it better. And that's what we live for. And PSD is one thing, but I think the reward we get is feeling like we learned our job, we did our job, and we left it better for the people whose house we left, or the car we cut open, or the baby we delivered, or the Band-Aid we put on the kid, or the bicycle we gave to somebody for Toys R Us. The things that we do aren't just all in the firehouse. There's things we do all around us all day long when you go out. You're going down the road to the grocery store, and some lady's walking with her groceries, and you stop and you put her in the truck and you take her home. Those things that guys have done all this time,
Yes.
helping somebody shovel a sidewalk.
Yes.
The things that we do that represent the firefighter, what we are, it's not the big red truck. It's the people in it that make it what it is.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Be good all the way around. Community
Yes.
service is community service.
Your job is 24 hours a day, not just what you're doing, but what you show and what your examples you give to people.
Absolutely.
100%.
And I've always told our kids, when they were even when they were young, I said, you're someplace, you go to Paris, you go to France, you go to Texas, and you're in trouble, you're scared or something's wrong. I said, go to the first firehouse you can see, walk in and tell them that your father or your brother is a firefighter. They will take care of you. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. You're a brotherhood. Same thing happened when I was in Iraq. As soon as they found out that I was a firefighter, we were brothers. We ate together, we talked together, we did things together, and they accepted you for who you are. We couldn't speak the language, we couldn't talk, but we knew who each other were because we did the same thing.
Now I was going to ask you about that. You retired, and then grass don't grow on a busy street, brother. So you got to it. How did you end up in Iraq? I know that you did that. How did that look? How did you do that? How did that work?
Hold on, I got to quiet this down a little bit. Yeah. I'd retired. I was home. Becky and I were very happy. We had a place we'd gotten in Bethany. We were down there enjoying the beach. The kids were growing and doing things. We were kind of just enjoying each other. Like I said, we're now talking to each other. We're sitting at the same table. And I get a call one morning Scott Graham called me. He says, do you like sand? And I said, yeah, I like sand. He says, well, this is about a place about a lot of sand. He says, we're looking for somebody to go to Iraq to help rebuild the infrastructure for the fire service. And so I said, well, we'll talk about it. So I turned to Becky and had this big smile. Of course, she says it looked like I was swallowed a parakeet. And she says, what did he want? I told her. And so we discussed it a little bit, and she agreed that we could try to do this. So I did all the preparation, wrote a resume, went to the Department of Defense, to Pentagon, did all the tests, took the medical things and all that, and went over there. It was very hard to leave the family because, like, we were sitting at the beach one day when they finally said we're going to do it, and we were sitting there, the two of us, and we're looking at the ocean, and everything's great. I'm retired, I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I'm going to leave. And I thought, maybe this is kind of stupid. But stupid, I do some things. And so she blessed me and said, you can go. In fact, we went to church that morning, and we were sitting there, and the first song they sang was Be Not Afraid. And, you're going to travel to foreign countries and all that. And so when I got over there, went to mass, and there was, of course, all the soldiers and bringing in with their rifles and setting them on the floor and their gear and everything. And in fact, Sanchez, the guy that was in charge of over there at the time, he was delivering communion to everybody. But the first song we sang was Be Not Afraid. And so that's kind of our theme about this thing. And so I said, I'm going to be gone for 6 months. That's a lot of days. So we agreed that it would be 6 moons, 6 full moons. So that gives a lot smaller number to look for, is 6 full moons that we'd be apart. And so when I was over there, I would text her, I see the moon coming up, I'm sending it to you. And she'd see it in the morning, and she'd say, or that night, because it was 24 hours different in time. And she said, I got your moon. And that's how we kind of communicated, is back and forth with emails and her support to do this, because without her support, I couldn't have done this. And it was very hard. She was alone. She was here at the house by herself and had to do those things that the wife does when you're gone. And of course, the kids supported her, but it was still, she was alone at home. She had to take the trash out and do all those things that, that you just do together. So it was a rewarding experience. The guys over there that I worked with were unbelievable. I still stay in touch with 2 of the chief master sergeants in the Air Force that I worked with. You could go on for an hour talking to just about the relationship and what we did for them and how we worked with the Iraqi people and the things that we accomplished.
How you set up? They didn't have a fire department, or how did you set up? You just set up how the station would look like, how do they run the calls?
They had a fire service. It's called the Ministry of Interior. It was some fire trucks and some fire stations, kind of like we know today, but they didn't have any equipment. They didn't have any money. Saddam hated the fire service. It was the lowest part of any life. If anybody was a good firefighter, he would take them and put them into his army. So they never were supportive of anything. All their fire trucks were, almost all of them, broken down. They didn't have any fuel. They didn't have any parts. They didn't have any running gear, any protection, any breathing apparatus, nothing. They just were kind of a fire department. They'd go to a fire and they would put it out with whatever water they had. The bomb team, the EOD team, as they called it, had a pair of pliers and a screwdriver and flip-flops. And that's what he went. So what we did is we had a $500 million budget, and there was another guy that was working with me, a chief master sergeant, Glenn Robinson. And he had developed a relationship with the guy that was the director of the fire service over there, the Ministry of Interior. And we met with him. We started developing policies with him. We started getting interaction with the firehouses, saw what they're needed. And then he left after 3 months, and Gene Roche came over, another chief master sergeant. He helped. He was very good at doing budgets. But we had 500 fire trucks were in Egypt. We got those over to there that Saddam wouldn't let come in. We got those over there. They didn't know how to run the fire trucks. They'd never seen something like that. So we had to develop a training class, and we developed a training a pamphlet. So they couldn't read English, so we had to translate it, and we wrote it all in Arabic. So they had an Arabic book, and then we had training classes. We went out and showed them how to use. There was a Halliburton had fire departments in each one of the different places to protect fires for if there was a fire in the green zone or something like that. So we used the fire department to help teach the classes. So we ended up getting training for them. We ended up getting the Japanese. We got budgets from them for generators for each fire station, so they had power when the power would go out because the power was irregular. They put in, and we said we need concrete pads to put in. They supported us and bought those. They bought some. We put budgets in for fire trucks, for protective clothing. We found out when we got the protective clothing, they were being done in a British or English company. And when you put your coat on, you put your coat in with your hands up, your thumbs up, goes through the wristlets. But when they made the coats, they designed them for, I guess, a lady doing it, and they put the thumbs on the bottom. Well, the coats wouldn't fit. We had to have that all changed. And then we found out that there was some bigger firefighters. We needed to have extra large gear, but we found out that the sizes in England and those different countries that were making the guys, extra large is not the same. And an extra large coat was like a medium for here. So a lot of the stuff didn't fit. So we had to change sizes.
Yeah.
We got SCBA. We ordered some of that stuff. There was no mapping. We didn't know where any firehouse was, didn't know where anything was. And so we go out and find them, but they didn't know how to read any maps. There wasn't any map of anything over there. So the Department of Defense had a mapping department. So we started developing a map for the fire service. We told the military anytime they went out on any deployment and they saw a firehouse, to get a GPS reading, you give it to us. And then we put that on the map. So we developed the first map of all the firehouses in Iraq. The communications or transportation for getting around was with Humvees, with some guys that were in the National Guard that had come up from Kuwait all the way through. And actually the guy that was the captain for that group was a captain in Myrtle Beach Fire Department. So we developed a pretty good bond with them. So they took us all around every place. And of course, nothing was hardened then. We sat in the back of the Humvees open and people would be shooting and rockets going off and all that stuff. But and then the other mean of transportation, when we wanted to go up to Ramadi or to Erbil or to some of those places, we would get on a Black Hawk helicopter and we would fly with them up to wherever it was, and we would get out and look at the firehouses and tour different things. One day we flew up to Erbil, and there was three of us, and I was doing the fire department. So the guy was doing roads and bridges, and the other guy was doing dams. And so I'd met with some of the guy was supposed to be a fire chief, I guess. He was probably a military guy. And he came in and we tried to meet. Of course, nobody could speak the language. They couldn't understand English. And so we got an interpreter. So the next day he said, well, do you want to go out into the country and see the firehouses and take a tour with me? And I said, sure. You know, nobody knew where I was. So I got in the car with them, and I had a pistol that had been given to me by one of the guys in the National Guard, because we had to have something to protect yourself if you were out on the road and you got shot, because you always had to have two shooters in every car with a bullet in the round in the chamber. So when I went out that day, I said, well, I'm not going to take any guns. It's not going to do me any good anyway. And I had a K-bar knife that I had strapped in my vest, because you wore an armored vest. Without any plates, they didn't have any plates for us then. So I took that and had it kept there anyway. So we went out and went through the old town of Erbil. And the next day he says, we're going to go up into Turkey, not Turkey, but up into the upper mountains towards Turkey. So I met him in the car in the morning. I got in this car with him and a driver and an interpreter, and away we went out through the countryside. And we drove all through the mountains, and up in there we stopped at some firehouses. And the only thing I really had was a lot of gloves. And I says, I really don't have anything I can give you, but I'm trying to promise you for the future, we're going to help make things better, but here's some gloves. And they would go through and they we look at the fire trucks and see the damage and see the problems. And they would look at their log books. They had log books of everything that had ever happened. Their log books were just like ours, except in Arabic. Their libraries were unbelievable. So we did this in several firehouses, and it was probably 7 or 8 at night. And they said, let's go to dinner. And I said, okay. So we went to this place. It was a restaurant in the round, and nobody was in there but just us. They had set a table up that was about 8 feet long, covered in food, little cans of Pepsi. So we sat and ate all this stuff. And of course, we get an interpreter helped us. And then they said, let's have dessert. So we turned around. There's a table behind us covered with fresh fruits and vegetables. We did all that. And now it's getting to be about midnight. And I said, I probably should head back. And the guy says, well, you can stay at my house tonight, and tomorrow we'll just continue. And I thought to myself, nobody knows in the world where I am. Nobody. And so I says, I probably was already
pretty out there.
Way out there. So I said, probably should head back because I got to report to some people. So they took me back, and of course the moon was real bright, and it was a beautiful night, and it was just one of those things, and made it back safely.
You looking back at that, you're like, wow, where was I? I mean, you doing it at breakneck pace, and then you get back, you're like, what the hell did I just do?
And then the thing that was, I think that it's like when Becky and I went to church, and it says, "Be not afraid." I felt like from the time that I went to the time that I got home, that God was watching over me. I really felt that I was protected. I didn't feel protected, but I felt safe. And even when in the hotel, the morning that it was rocketed when I was sleeping, I just felt protected. And then when the thing blew up and everything was going on, which we can talk about later, And I got up and I says, I got to get out of here. And I was on the 7th floor. And I got to the elevator and I says, the elevators don't work. I says, I can't leave. I'm a fireman. So I started looking around in rooms for somebody, and there was a guy laying there. It was a colonel. He had first taken shots at the people who were rocketing the building, and he was he was injured pretty bad. So I got another guy, and I says, here, let's get him out of here. And we put him on a sheet, and we took him down the stairs. And of course, the stairs and all those palaces, everything were white marble. And all the glass that had broken, everybody went running out of the rooms barefooted, and everybody's feet were cut. So the marble stairs were covered, just almost the color of your shirt, Russell. They were covered in blood. So we were taking this guy down the steps. And as we were taking him down, I looked up the steps and there's a TV camera. I said, who in the hell's got a TV camera here? Well, it was Wolf Blitzer was there. He was living in the same hotel. And his cameraman caught us on the camera. And our son-in-law then was working at a bar in D.C. at the airport. And he happened to look at the TV and he said, that's my father-in-law. But anyway, we got him down and went back up. And I started doing some more searching and ran into a colonel up there. And I said, we got to search these rooms. And he didn't know how to search. And he started looking. And I said, no, you got to look under all these mattresses and stuff. They're underneath. They're not going to be on top of this. Yeah. And I was walking down the hallway one time. And there's a whole other story to this. But before I left, a guy from one of the companies had given me a set of running gear to take over there to show because he hoped he could sell some. And I took my helmet from here, Montgomery County. I wore my helmet. I had it there, and I'd given it to one of the fire department guys to use because I wasn't going to use it. And I looked up, and here's this guy coming down the hallway with my helmet on. I says, "What the hell are you doing?" It was pretty neat. It was pretty neat.
Pretty cool.
That's diversing a lot.
Wow, that's quite an experience. This is after your career. Wow.
Yeah, man, that is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we did there, and the people there were Colonel Lath and Colonel Omid. Colonel Lath was he probably one of the strongest leaders that I'd ever seen from over the career, because he was an Iraqi, but he took care of his men. He trained his men. He spoke some English, broken English, but we could communicate. And he was a great man, a great man. And then we had an interpreter that worked with us, Ahmad, who had been put in prison by Saddam for 5 years. And he learned languages. He knew how to speak 5 languages. He was Christian. And he was with us a lot. And he and I developed a pretty good relationship. And a lot of times there would be a bombing and he would call me and he'd say, I know where they are. So I got him hooked up with naval intelligence, and we worked with naval intelligence on sending troop outs to find these people, because he would tell me where things were, and then it would happen. He'd be whispering and saying, they're right. Yeah.
Wow. So
a lot of good things, a lot of good experiences. There's a lot of neat stories I could tell you sometime about this all happened, how the country changed after he was gone.
Yeah.
And the day that he was caught, we were out doing some training, and the captain says, we got to get back in. He says, they found Saddam and there's going to be a lot of shooting, because the only way they knew how to celebrate was shoot their AK-7s in the 40 air, and bullets were flying everywhere. And of course, they got to come down.
Yeah, he did.
Right.
So he said, we got to get inside. We got to get back into the green zone before they start shooting, because there's going to be rain of bullets.
Yeah. So you spend this incredible time in Iraq for 6 months, it was?
Yes.
Okay. So you finally come back. So now what is life like after you come back from that?
Oh my. I'll tell you what, trying to come here, first coming back, and you're on the plane and you're excited about meeting your family. And Becky had all the kids and the grandkids were at the airport, and they were all young then. And to walk through that gate and to see them standing there, man, it was like one of the warmest. Your heart kind of just blows up, to be with them and to put your arms around your wife. It was the greatest feeling in the world. It was the greatest feeling in the world. It was nothing like it. And it's just, she was there for me the whole time, and she was there for me when they came back. And the kids were all there. In fact, when we got in the car, we were going to go someplace and get breakfast with everybody. And we get in the van, and I sit in, and I started to start the van, and they said, what's wrong? And I said, I don't hear any noise. They said, what do you mean? I said, nobody put a round in the chamber. Because we always put a round in the chamber before we went out. I says, now we don't have to do that.
Oh
Wow, man.
Yeah.
Used to being back home.
Yeah. Oof.
And
I
it
can
was
only.
being home was good. And
Yes.
yes.
So what did you do? I guess after that, you get home, you get settled back in, and now you're retired still. So now what does life look like now after you're back?
Oh, you finally get to start catching up on some of the stuff you should have done a long time ago, and just being together and seeing the kids. And then they got this job offer the next year for doing backgrounds, and so I started doing backgrounds for the next 23 years.
You did
for
backgrounds
Montgomery
in
County.
Montgomery County Fire and Rescue. Yeah.
Yep. Working with Mike Ziegler was the first boss, and Michael Brady, and that was a neat experience. And the guys I worked with are all a lot of them retired Montgomery County Police or FBI or Secret Service. They were all cool people to work with. It was a great learning experience for that too. It was kind of neat to come and do something where you're meeting people that want to be a fireman. They're so excited about their new job. You've been working with people who've been doing it for years, and everybody's getting tired and they're frustrated. Now I'm meeting people that are excited about this job. This is a new job. I want to get hired, and that was kind of exciting to see them in a different perspective than what you had been seeing.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, it was kind of interesting. One day we were sitting there, everybody's kind of nervous when they come in, and they were going through all these papers. And I says, man, you got everything here except one thing. You're missing one piece. What's that? And he was all nervous. I said, your expiration date. He said, how do I get that? I said, God. And I laughed and he laughed. But it was neat. It was neat to see people at a different light and see these guys coming from Pennsylvania that borrow their uncle's or their father's suit, and their tie is way out here, and they got somebody else's coat and suit on, but they're coming with a job, and they got a stack of trading papers this big because they're bringing everything they got. And it was a neat, interesting experience.
Right.
I bet it's a breath of fresh air, working with people who are excited and to start the career.
Yep, it was. And then you see some of the people who come in who weren't prepared, wearing shorts, didn't have their documents filled out, and you think, well, now they can't hire him. But you can't tell anybody. You can't say you can't hire him. It's not our job. We just do the stuff. But you see that today. The guys that you've worked with, the guys that are going to do the job and the guys that are a pain in the ass. Everybody has them.
Mm-hmm.
And you spend all your time on the pain in the ass instead of the good guys, because the good guys are doing all the work while you're taking care of the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You've been there. You've been there.
People, 90% of the problem. Yeah.
Yep.
You spent 90% of the time on 10% of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So when did you retire from backgrounds?
This last December, I think I told Mike Brady, I said, it's time for me to hang up the spurs and put the saddle away and do some other things in life besides being the fire department. The core of everything we're doing is it's if you look at this room I'm sitting in, it's for the fire department memorabilia and pictures and stuff. But it's the most important thing in my life is the woman sitting upstairs in the house here that's been with me from the beginning. I mean, you can't say enough about what she's done and given up.
Okay.
It sounds like she's been your rock throughout this whole
You talk about a counseling person. She's been the person I dumped on stuff on for many years, and she held it and she didn't take it anywhere. But I could tell the things that bothered me the most and frustration, and come home sometimes and you don't understand. You're shaking your head, and there she was. She was there for it, and she took a lot of abuse from all this. Yeah, very thankful. We're very, very blessed for our lives and our kids. We got a son who's Monty's retired, of course, and our other daughter, Julie, she's a nurse, and our other daughter's a teacher. So they're all in public service.
How's that feel to have a legacy, really? A legacy. You have your son following your footsteps, same county, it's pretty cool.
It's pretty neat because kind of as he went through, you were able to follow and see what he did, and he kind of kept you connected to the service because you still had an insight of hearing what was going on. He didn't tell me a lot of what was happening, but you still felt like you were still a piece of what was there. And that was cool. I enjoyed that. And I was very proud of what he did, because I know a lot of times that people didn't care for how he did stuff, but he did stuff because he wanted people to do better. And he wanted people to do their job, and he would teach anybody if they would listen. But
right.
This job is very, very interesting. It's very easy, but it can be very trying.
Extremely.
It can wear on you.
It can wear on you, but he had a good career. He had a very good career.
Yes, he did a lot of stuff with FEMA and the technical rescue and teaching. He enjoyed teaching. He was a good instructor. I think I never got to take any of his classes, but from what I heard from people, he was tough.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get him on the show. In the month to come.
He'd be interesting to talk to. Yeah. He loved the fire service. He probably would have stayed longer. I think he just had it. He thought it was time because he wasn't able to communicate with who he needed to communicate with. There wasn't a response back, and I think he just he loved Battalion 1. He loved what was happening there, and I think the battalion, they all liked each other and they worked good together, and that's true in a lot of places. I mean, you go in the stations, you know which stations are tight and which stations need help.
Right.
And you're blessed to be in one of them that gives you a challenge, but helps you get through it.
That's right.
Absolutely. So now that you are, I guess, retired for the second time, what does life look like for you now?
We're just enjoying things. In fact, you talk about what you get after this is you do a lot of medical stuff. You get to see a lot of doctors. In fact, when we sit around with guys that we worked with and we say for the first 15 minutes, we can talk about medicine. After that, we'll talk about fun stuff. But everybody's going to the doctor for something. In fact, tomorrow I got some procedures to do and followed with probably some surgery later on. But that's just, I'm blessed to be able to be 82 years old and still talking to you guys.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. And you sound great. Mind is clear.
That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Everything's there, man. Everything's
some
there.
people question the mind, but.
So looking back, if you had a chance to talk to yourself walking in the first day as a volunteer, what would you say to that young man walking into Kensington to do this instructor firefighting? I know you did some wildland firefighting, but structure firefighting here in Montgomery County.
If knowing what I know today, I would tell him to learn from everybody he can, take as many classes as you can, get the experiences and as much as you can, and get so familiar with your job, get familiar with your equipment, your breathing apparatus. And then as a career person, I would say all that, but I would also say every time you get a pay raise, put half of that pay raise into some kind of a savings, because you don't have that money and you won't miss not having it, but half of it now is saving, and you can still live on a little bit less, but you're gaining a little bit more. But do that every time there's an opportunity to put some money away to save it, because it's hard to do because you have more and more expenses, but you're going to need that money later. So
sure.
Yeah, and take care of yourself, take care of your health. So, and I don't think you can tell people or show people pictures in the beginning of what they're going to see, because they're not going to understand it. But I say you got to prepare yourself for what you might see, because a lot of the things we see are bad. A lot of the things we do are people cut up and broken up and not in the same parts they're supposed to be. And you can't tell somebody that. So you have to train them to do their job and why they're doing their job, and be prepared, mental and physically, to do these things. And hopefully you'll work into it a little bit at a time, and you'll grow and grow as you go through your job. But I would tell them to save money and train and learn and be in good shape.
Yeah.
Your health is your wealth. That's right.
Your health is your strongest tool.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so what would you say to that firefighter that's getting ready to retire in a few years?
Congratulations. You came through it. You made it. Enjoy that time. Keep in touch with the people you worked with as much as you can. Keep in touch with people who've gone before you to kind of keep up and see how they're doing. Maybe talk to people. Hopefully, at some point in your career, you went to HR and you talked about retirement, you talked about benefits, and you have those things. So when the day you sit down and say, I'm signing these papers, how am I going to take my retirement? Is it lump sum, a sum, or give 10% to my wife, or how am I going to do this? You've already thought this things through, because if you haven't done that the day you go to retire, you got a lot of surprises, and you need to prepare yourself for that. And are you ready to go home and stay home? Do you know how to be home? So, do you have a home?
Yeah. There you go. Good question.
Yes, because sometimes that hadn't happened,
Right.
and that's sad.
Yeah.
And it's not all because of the fire department. It's yourself. There's things that happen.
Right.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed. So now to kind of wrap up, this is the question we always ask our guests. So now that the smoke is cleared on your career, I mean, for a while now, but when you wake up in the morning and you take a look at yourself in the mirror, who is that man looking back at you, and what do you say to him?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. He's thankful every morning he wakes up that God has given him another day to try to get it right. Because every day, you have a chance to see if you can't do it better than you did yesterday. And so thankful to look next to me that Becky's laying there or sitting there or getting up or around us, so we can think about talking about what we're going to do. We can call the grandkids, or we can have the kids come over. Enjoy the life that you've earned and worked so hard for, because you don't know how much more time you have for it. Our days are, nobody knows how long you got. Every day is important. It's like if you put a leaf in a river, you're that leaf, and it goes this way. It never comes back up here to do it over. You have to keep doing it and do it, change it or make it better. But hopefully you've prepared yourself. So when you look in that mirror, you're proud of who you saw. I didn't give anybody something I didn't think they deserved. I didn't take anything that I thought was for a benefit of me. I felt that I did what I was supposed to do for the betterment of the people. And I always thought that my other most important resource that I ever had was you guys. To be there with them, to be out there at night when they're out there working. I felt I needed to be out there too. I don't think the shift chiefs do that today. I think it's important to be with your people because they're working. And if you don't know what they're doing and you don't watch how they're doing it, how can they do it better? Or how can they be how can you do your job if you don't know what they're doing? We're not supposed to sit there and just read papers and tell people what to do. We got to know how to tell them what to do and show them and be there with them. And I think that's important. And I think that I can look in the mirror and say that hopefully in most cases, I was looking at the guy that did the right thing.
All right. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I'm going to speak for people that at least that work under you and work around you and know what you've meant to this department. Appreciate you and thank you for your service. I know you've heard it, but I mean, it seems like thank you is not enough. I know you're not big on that. I mean, you said like I did what I was supposed to do, but someone needs to say, okay, give you credit for the service you've given us for all this time.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm very, very happy and pleased that I got to work with you guys and do the things I did with you. I mean, it's the best thing that ever happened to me other than getting married. That was it. The two most important things I did was I married my wife first and I got in the fire department. And I'm out of the fire department. I'm still with her.
That's right.
Thankfully, she stuck with me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I really do appreciate you guys calling. There's a lot of stories we can tell off the camera someday. But appreciate your interview and inviting me because it's an honor to talk to you. And what you're doing is good. So keep it up.
Thank you.
Good work.
Yep. And it's our pleasure. Our pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way they could do that?
Well, they can always call my phone, 301-767-5835, or they can email me. Or they can just stop by, bring a shovel the snow.
You smell there, right?
All right.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chief Monte Fitch, thank you so much for sitting down and
sir.
talking with us.
Appreciate your
We
time.
appreciate you.
Yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. I'll be listening to more of your podcasts. I've listened to a few of them, so I'll just sit down and do more of them. So you're doing good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for listening to the When the Smoke Clears podcast. Be sure to check out our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Just search for the When the Smoke Clears podcast. Feel free to email us at whenthesmokeclears8@gmail.com. That's whenthesmokeclears and the number 8@gmail.com. You can also support the show by going to the website buymeacoffee.com/whenthesmokeclears and donating however much you'd like.